Top 3 Scariest Hotel Horror Stories You Can't Unhear. Warning, you are about to enter a world of terror so intense, so bone-chilling, that the mere act of hearing this story may forever change you. Do not proceed if you're not prepared for the nightmares that follow. Story 1. The Mirror in Room 217. It was meant to be a weekend getaway, a retreat to relax after months of stress. Sarah and her partner checked into an old hotel on the edge of a small town. The building was beautiful but ancient. The lobby had that musty old wood smell, the kind you only find in places that have been standing for over a century. The receptionist greeted them with a knowing smile, too knowing, but they didn't think much of it. They were tired and the room was ready. Room 217 was the only room available. The receptionist looked at them, his eyes narrowing slightly as he handed over the key. "It's a charming room. You'll love it," he said with a tone that made Sarah uneasy, but she brushed it off. The room was dimly lit, a large antique mirror hung above the bed. Its frame was covered in intricate carvings, old-fashioned, almost gothic. Sarah was drawn to it immediately, but when she stood before it, she didn't see her own reflection. The mirror was a perfect reflection of the room except for the bed. It was empty. Sarah laughed it off as a trick of the light. But when night fell, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She woke up to the sound of breathing beside her, slow and deep. Terrified, she turned toward her partner, only to find him fast asleep, his breathing steady. But then she heard it again. The breathing. Louder this time. She froze, eyes wide, heart pounding. Slowly she turned toward the mirror. In the reflection, a woman stood at the foot of the bed, staring at her with hollow eyes. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't scream. The woman's hand raised slowly, pointing directly at her, as if beckoning her. The air grew cold, the shadows deepened, and then, the woman smiled. "You're not alone," the reflection whispered. The glass was no longer just a reflection. It was a portal, an abyss. The figure began to step through, her fingers curling around the frame, pulling herself closer to Sarah. The glass groaned, and the figure's footsteps echoed in the room as it moved closer, closer to Sarah's trembling form. But Sarah couldn't run. She was frozen, caught in the grip of the nightmare. The last thing she remembered was the cold, icy fingers of the woman wrapping around her wrist, pulling her into the glass. The next morning, the hotel staff found the room empty, except for Sarah's belongings and the old mirror. The reflection was now a perfect mirror of the empty room, except there was a new figure. A woman standing at the foot of the bed, her hollow eyes staring, waiting for someone else. Story 2. The Guest Who Never Left. John had been traveling for business and needed a place to stay for the night. He booked the last room at an old hotel near the highway. It was small, but it had everything he needed. He didn't think twice about it. The room was cheap, too cheap. The air was thick, the wallpaper peeling, but it was late and he was too tired to care. He collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep almost immediately. Sometime during the night, he was awakened by soft footsteps. At first, he assumed it was a staff member checking on him, but then the door creaked open. John turned, expecting to see someone standing there, but no one was in the doorway. Just before he could fall back asleep, the whispers started. Low, unintelligible murmurs, as though a conversation was happening in the next room. But it wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from inside the room. John pulled the covers over his head, trying to ignore it, but the whispers grew louder. They were circling around him, filling his mind with thoughts that weren't his own. "They're watching you, you're not alone, you'll never leave." Suddenly the bed shifted. Someone, was lying next to him. He could feel the weight, the warmth of a body beside him, but when he turned, there was no one there. The whispers became laughter. And then a voice, clear and cold, "You'll stay with us forever." John tried to run. He bolted from the bed, heart racing. The door wouldn't open. It was locked, though he was sure he hadn't locked it. The walls closed in. The whispers became screams. John's pulse raced as his body began to freeze, his mind spinning in horror. The last thing he saw was the figure standing at the foot of the bed, smiling with hollow eyes. He disappeared without a trace. His room was left untouched, and the next guest who booked the room reported hearing the same whispers and feeling the same oppressive presence. It had never stopped. Story 3. The Hotel That Wasn't There. Mark and his friends were on a road trip, looking for a place to rest. They drove down an isolated highway, the dark woods pressing in on either side. They stumbled upon an old hotel. It wasn't on any map. The hotel's sign hung crookedly, barely visible in the dim moonlight, but they didn't care. It was late and they needed to sleep. The front desk was unmanned and the lobby was strangely empty. There were no other guests, just the sound of old music playing softly in the background. The receptionist, a pale man with hollow eyes, handed them a room key without saying a word. The room was cold, dark, and had a strange, musty smell. But as they settled in, things began to feel wrong. The silence was too complete. No sounds from outside. No distant hum of traffic, no animal noises. Just nothing. Mark tried to shake off the feeling, but as the night dragged on, strange things began to happen. The shadows in the room grew longer, twisting and moving like living things. The lights flickered on and off. Mark looked out the window. The forest outside was gone. In its place, a black abyss stretched as far as he could see. Panic set in. His friends were gone, vanished. The bed was empty, the bathroom door shut tight. He rushed to the door only to find it sealed shut. It wouldn't open no matter how hard he tried. And then from the hallway came the soft sound of footsteps. Slow, methodical, approaching. But no one was there. Mark turned to look at the mirror hanging on the wall. His reflection wasn't quite right. He was smiling, but he wasn't the one smiling. The reflection was smiling at him. And then the door opened. The last thing Mark saw was the pale man from the front desk, standing in the doorway, his eyes empty, his lips curled in a sinister grin. The shadows behind him moved like something alive. Mark was never seen again. The hotel was never seen again. And now, when you close your eyes at night, you might hear the whispers calling you. You've heard the stories. You've listened. And now the hotel knows you too. If you dare to keep listening, subscribe now. Because what you've just heard isn't over. It's watching. It's waiting. And now, it's with you.